Now, once you mount the nomad, not so much on a donkey or an onager, but on a horse at least or a camel, he literally and not just figuratively looks down on the city people and on the settled farmer, actually from a greater height and peremptory. He has a certain contempt for them. He's tougher and stronger than they are. He mistrusts them, they mistrust him. He is a savage to them, he smells bad to them, and he does not have the essentials of what everyone knows you need to have. You need to have a house, and you need to have land to work, and these are just the basics. You need to have a wall to run inside when bad things happen. And these people are half animals that live out there in their camps with their animals and all of these things. So there is a natural aversion that the two sides have for each other. At the same time, the document is attempting to reconcile and harmonize these two lifestyles, because by the time of its wide dissemination, we are occupying those cities of the wretched Canaanites. We are the metal workers. We are the traders now, and we have the institution of monarchy. There is perhaps no greater ambiguity, other perhaps than sexuality itself, but there is no, other than sexuality, there is no greater ambiguity in the text than the concept of monarchy and human authority in general. It at once doesn't like this concept, and at the same time it's mandated. There is the last overlay that is of the redactor who finally put everything together from J onward, and he clearly is living under a monarchy that cannot conceive of another or better way for civilization to be. This is the ultimate. It is much the same way that America has created a cult of democracy. So it was that the Israelite created a cult of monarchy. The cult of democracy is, we believe this is the best way to live, we believe it's best for everybody else, and we're kind of prepared to go to war if other people at least want our help, and maybe even if they don't, to establish this style of living. This is exactly what the concept of monarchy had become in its final stages to the Israelites. That you're a savage without a king, you're not as good as anyone else, and yet there is maintained in the document a certain fear and reservation. So these are people who believe in democracy, but at the same time they're, let's say, libertarians who realize that democracy can become an oppression of the majority. So they realize also here in this document that God is the king, the monarch is subordinate to God, and this ambiguity runs throughout the text. Like the Sumerian and the Akkadian texts, it is a text of poetry. And it doesn't translate all that well, but Ha'azinu shamayim va'adabera, give ears to me, heavens, and I will speak, and let the earth hear the words of my mouth. My doctrine shall drop as the rain, my speech shall distill as the dew, as the small rain upon the tender grass, as the showers upon the herb. I will proclaim the name of God, ascribe you greatness unto our God. The rock, his work is perfect, for all God's ways are justice. A God of faithfulness without iniquity, just and right is God. So we have a strong poetic element that occasionally appears in the Torah. Certainly not as often as it will in the later writings. But it's clear from the document that the Torah was not just designed to instruct, it was also designed to inspire. How was this document presented? What was the presentation? How did the people get this? One of the interesting things we see is that from the first recorded instance of Torah reading, it was done almost exactly the way we experience Torah reading today. And what I mean by that is, one person is reading to a crowd who is listening that does not understand the language in which the Torah is being read and requires a translation in order to relate to it. From the beginning. What's the beginning? The earliest time that we have, not midrashically, but textually, and we can verify it to a certain extent historically, is the return of the exiles from Babylonia. It is now in the 500s, it's in the 6th century before the Common Era. The Babylonian exile has been brought to an end by Cyrus the Great overwhelming that part of the world and allowing the Jewish community to return. A portion does return. We come back to Jerusalem, and One incredible individual who also might be a composite character, that is Ezra HaSofer. We might say two incredible individuals, the cupbearer of the king Nehemiah as well, but primarily Ezra, helped reinvent Judaism so that it would survive the diaspora and to this day. And it is now Ezra's challenge to integrate aspects of the old cult with the newly developed religion. The newly developed religion is the religion of Beit Midrash, of study hall, of scripture, of prayer, of moral and social justice, of charity. The old religion is the religion of the blood sacrifice, of the incense offerings, of the priesthood, and of the functions of the temple. There is no temple when Ezra comes back. They begin sacrifices before it's rebuilt. They will rebuild it and reinstate the sacrifices. According to the Gemara in Ta'anit and in Sanhedrin, the prayers that we recite in the Siddur begin in essentially their form at this time, at the beginning of the Second Temple. Ezra also reinstates, or one of the first things he reinstates, is a grand public Torah reading and the institution of a mitorgeman, a translator. This will set the pattern for monotheistic worship services for Jews, Christians, and Muslims down to this day. And what is that? A prayer to God, the recitation of songs and hymns, a scriptural reading, and a homiletical address based upon an explanation of the text, of the scriptural text. That is a description of everybody's service. Everybody davens that way, Jew, Christian, and Muslim, in some form or other. That's how they do it. The first one to set this pattern seems to be Ezra the scribe about 2,500 years ago. The people did not understand Hebrew. They were Aramaic speakers. When the text was read to them, they all stood and they listened to the text, and then they needed the mitorgamin who just translated it to them. We don't know how much or if they inserted commentary. But there is a strong Jewish tradition which says anything you do is commentary. You don't even have to translate the text. If you read it out loud, any inflection given to the voice is immediately interpretive and therefore is commentary. So there is no such thing in Jewish tradition really as a true fundamentalist. Everyone must necessarily add perspective to it or give it perspective where it is. It is said that Ezra gave us the trup so we would know how to phrase and emphasize this strange language Torah. Yes?
Go back and you said that the first reading of the Torah was done in Hebrew to an audience that spoke Aramaic. But meanwhile, when we were in Babylon, they've been studying Torah, they've been writing.
What were they doing in Babylon is a good question. Yes, they've been studying Torah, but Hebrew had already become a language for scholars and a language of scholarship. It's very much... I suppose it's... I'm trying to think of a modern analogy or example. I guess it would be that of the yeshiva student's Hebrew versus the Israeli's Hebrew. The yeshiva student can get through all the texts really well, better than the Israeli can, but he will not be able to necessarily hold his end up of a conversation in the modern tongue. And that might have been what they had. They had a scholar's knowledge of the text, but it was not really a conversant knowledge.
And before they left, before the exile, there was no public reading of the Torah?
It doesn't seem so. Ezra may have innovated something else and also might touch upon an answer to your question. Judaism has always had a dynamic tension between popularism and elitism, and we do not necessarily favor one to the absolute exclusion of the other. There are many elitist tendencies in Judaism. The knowledge of Hebrew was probably restricted to a very narrow group of scholars at the top of the society, and the average person spoke Aramaic. Ezra's innovation was not just a public Torah reading, but truly making it public. That it is, the whole nation was assembled there, every segment of society, from the poorest of the poor on up. That was unique. And for most of these people, the knowledge of Hebrew was not readily accessible.